Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, welcome. Welcome to John Kelly's Thrive. Today's show is what to do when counseling and talking to your child doesn't work and they are still abusing substances. We put this channel together because we want to try and educate families on some suggestions on what to do when they find a loved one is abusing or self-destructing with substances. I mean, we have to be honest about it that substance abuse and addictive illness are killing a lot more people throughout the country. I mean, they kill more people than serial killers. Addictive illness is probably, the biggest killer right now going on throughout the country, other than, say, cancer or heart disease. I'm very, very concerned about it, this fentanyl epidemic and everything else. So we put this channel together for you, and hopefully you find that it helps and you get some useful education out of it. It's called Thrive. The one thing I have to tell you, these are only my thoughts and suggestions based on my strength, hope, and experience after being 28 years in the counseling business. I was a director of outpatient counseling services in New Jersey for probably over 20 years, but in the field about 28 years. So what I'm trying to say to you, these are our suggestions on what we've seen work. This is not counseling here or professional advice. These are only suggestions, and certainly these are only suggestions, based on you, because you're the one. You are the king and queen of your house, your family. You're the ones that make the decisions on what happens. Okay, so we can give you suggestions, but you guys are the decision makers. Bottom line, okay. Years ago, I wrote this book 22 years ago, Warning Signs, a guidebook for parents. And that was 22 years ago. And I'll tell you what, I have only seen a lot of things get worse because I see a kind of break in the family, which really bothers me. And I would hope that we can help and all of us can be part of turning that around. From my understanding, these days, one out of every three kids growing up don't have a mentor. That's 33% of the children in the country do not have a mentor, somebody they can look up to and trust as they're growing up. That's pretty concerning to me, especially knowing what I know coming out of the field. What to do when your child is not listening to you and your intervention by talking to them has not worked. Because usually that's the first step, right? You're going to start to talk to your child, your loved one. It can be a husband, it can be a wife, it can be a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. You're going to try to talk to them rationally first, and hopefully rationally without going off the edge, because usually screaming, hollering, and anger and condescending language and criticizing someone really is not going to get you the desired effect you're looking for. Okay. This illness is very deceiving and it's a very mysterious illness and it needs to be dealt with in certain ways. Okay. This suggestion I'm giving to you now is, after you've taken them to a professional therapist and they are still not listening or following the rules in the house and they're still self-destructing with substance. Okay. So these are our suggestions. The question is, what really works? See, that's what we're looking for here. We know criticism doesn't work. We know screaming, hollering, carrying on. That stuff doesn't work. Only makes things worse usually, and usually gets the addicted person or self-abusing or abusing person or self-abusing person that could be going on as well on the run. Okay. And they start to put up a wall and they don't want to hear anything because maybe at that time, the substance abuse has a grip on them and they're not thinking rationally at all. And the substance abuse is having them act quite irrational at this point. So the question is, what works better, criticism or consequences? Criticism is usually not very helpful, and people usually find it demeaning. Okay. Now, it's very hard not to criticize. I mean, I understand that because usually, somebody that's really hooked up with substance abuse and really tied into addictive illness in some way is acting out in a real negative manner. I mean, they could be stealing, they could be angry, they could be going into fits of rage, they could be destroying things, they could be getting, DWIs. They could be very demeaning and demanding for money and other things. They could try to bully you, take advantage of you in any which way, shape they can to get money to feed that addiction that is driving them, to feed that monster inside. So when it comes to criticism usually doesn't work. It only gets backlash or the person retreats. It only makes a lot of people feel guiltier and worse. And unfortunately, the guiltier one feels, the more they will try to soothe that guilt and get out of that feeling and use more substance abuse. Because what'll take them out of the guilt, feeling guilty? What'll take them out of feeling any negative feelings? They know what makes them feel good, whatever substance it is, whatever their substance of choice is. Okay. Also, criticism can be looked at as another form of rejection. Think about it. Depending on how angry you are, rejection can be looked at as another form of abandonment. So the criticism may not just stop with criticizing, it can go into a deeper level where criticism becomes a form of rejection, and rejection certainly is a form of abandonment. And it can hit them that quickly. Like, oh my God, my parents, or she doesn't love me anymore. He doesn't love me anymore. Or, I've totally pushed my family away and they don't want anything to do with me. And I'm a piece of garbage and I deserve everything I'm getting. That kind of thinking. Okay. Because nobody wants to be rejected, and certainly nobody wants to be abandoned by their family at some level. But don't forget, the addiction's running the game here. The addictive illness is running the person. Okay. So the criticism usually doesn't produce a good outlook. What I suggest, and again, the word is suggestion, you have to make the decisions, not me. When all else fails, I suggest trying consequences and letting the loved one see and feel the loss of something. Feel the loss of something they enjoy because of their irrational use and of their behavior. Their constant substance abuse use will produce irrational behavior, and it's going to really disrupt their household. And it flows all the way around. It upsets not only them, but it upsets the whole family hierarchy and the house in general. And it can affect siblings. It can affect whoever lives in the house, and even who's out of the house. That's family too, because relatives and loved ones don't want to hear about somebody they love, self-destructing from substance abuse. So the most important thing is trying to get them back on track and trying to get them to follow the family rules, the rules of the house. And how can you do that if, talking to them rationally hasn't worked, taking them to a professional counselor hasn't worked. Now criticizing and fighting with them and demeaning them and putting them down, hasn't worked. And all of everybody feels terrible about spewing their anger all around the house. When all that hasn't worked, we've seen that the best results come when they lose something, when they have losses, when they face a consequence for their irrational or self-destructive substance abuse behavior. Okay, usually that's when you're going to see things change. All right, and don't forget, if they're living under your roof, you're pretty much the hierarchy in that house, and you probably hold the purse strings. Okay, and you're the benefactor. You're their benefactor. So in a lot of ways, you can set up various consequences. And I don't think you got to go to the worst consequence at the top of the list, which is putting somebody out of your house. Although I've seen that work, I've seen it work miracles. But I think you can start slowly and work your way up to that. And what do I mean by that is maybe you can hold back on some money. Maybe you can hold back on their phone. Maybe you can hold back on paying their phone if you're paying the phone bill. Maybe you can hold back on a car. There's a lot of monetary things or financial things that, the benefactor of the house, usually king and queen of the house, the hierarchy of the house, even if it's only one person, okay, can put out there. And we've seen when consequences are put out there, we see more people responding. They seem to respond better than responding to criticism. Okay. And like I said, there's a lot of things you can do. You don't start at the top of the list where you're throwing them out of the house, although it could come to that. If they're self-destructing and on their way to hell and taking you along for the ride, for some of your other children, I mean, then you have to consider putting them out, and consider putting them out for their own good. But that's a decision you have to make. I can't make that decision. I'm just telling you what we've seen work, what not work, and usually consequences can work. We've seen people face a consequence of going to the courts and meeting with the judge. A lot of courts have crisis units, and they used to anyway. And you could go in there and get a counselor, and they would talk to the child first. And if that didn't work, then and they kept continuing to self-destruct or their irrational behavior, then they would be taken before the judge, and hopefully the judge would kind of scare them a little bit, scare them straight a little bit, and they'd get back in line and realize they don't want to end up for real in a court of law facing time in jail. So they straighten up. Some do, some don't. Most do, but some don't, depending on how young you catch the child. The younger, the better shot you got. The older they are, the harder they are to turn around. No question about it. Okay. So it's very important to keep these various consequences in mind and to think about which ones to use and when to use them. I think that's very important. Um, you know, when you look at creature features, I'll call it, okay. When you look at creature features, a lot of teens and young adults are very concerned about their creature features. They really respect and want that phone. Okay. And I don't know how much power you have over that, but a lot of them, even if they're away at school, need you to pay for their schooling, need you to send them an allowance. Maybe you're paying off a car, and you can have some control over that car, whether they get to use it or not. But most teens and most young adults, they really love their phones, they really love their cars, they want to be in college with their friends. They have other things that they spend money on that they need you for. Who buys their clothes, who buys their food, who takes care of them. So there's a lot of A lot of things you can use as consequences to save your loved one from self-destructing as you move up the list, you know. Losing the creature features can definitely turn a light on in one's head. Okay, for instance, if somebody's used to their phone and that's how they communicate with everybody, and they're the life of the party, if you will, on their phone. Once that phone's gone, I mean, that really brings somebody back to reality. Okay, we found that with younger people, and they're very interested on what they can do to try and get that phone back, right? Because that's it's something that's that has become a way of life with them. So it really gives them insight, and insight's the beginning of change. But it gives them insight at where they really are at, where reality is, coming out of that kind of substance abuse or drug stupor, and whoa, man, this is for real. I've lost my phone now, or I'm not getting any allowance. I don't have any money to eat with, or my car's gone. Wow, how am I going to take Susie out this week? How am I going to get around? So it can bring somebody to back to a real important reality of how important it is to practice self care. Consequences cause uncomfortability, as I think I mentioned, which causes change. Think about it. When you change, I mean, it's because something has caused you to become uncomfortable, usually. All right. So uncomfortability not only gives you insight, but the insight gives you thought for change. So you end up changing. And it's because of this uncomfortability. Well, that's the way it works when you create uncomfortability for somebody you love. Okay. And it's unconditional love. Because I love you, I'm creating this uncomfortability. So you gain insight into your self destructive behavior and you start to change. Now, that's where the saying comes from, hitting bottom. That's where it comes from. Because what do you think bottom is? Bottom is a whole lot of uncomfortability. And in many, many, many cases, me included, it caused change. Okay. No doubt about it. That's the bottom line. Criticism causes people to feel negative. Okay. It's like their soul starts to constrict. I mean, you've been criticized for anything. I'm sure you don't like it. Even if you've been wrong, you don't like the feeling, right? It's like constricting the soul. It's like a closing of the soul in a way, you know? And I truly believe that criticism pours more gas on the fire and makes things worse. So that's why I like to see consequences versus criticism, but starting off slow and moving up because you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwash, right? And it's very hard to stop criticizing if somebody's acting out and addicted and abusing drugs to the point of where they're running amok throughout the house and creating all these kinds of disturbances, or lying, cheating, stealing, whatever. I mean, it can really cause hell in your house. I believe consequences work better, but certainly it's up to you to put them out there. I don't know what consequences to use on your children or your family. That's up to you. You're the boss, right? You kind of come up with that decision. As I said earlier, you're the king and queen of your home, and you have to make the decisions. But thank you so much for tuning in today. Truly appreciate it. And I hope you take care of yourselves out there. We live in a very violent world. Please keep a focus on yourself and your families, and have a wonderful day. And until we meet again, God bless and thank you so much.